Welcome to the War Within Season 1 Preservation Evoker Guide. This guide will mostly be focused on Mythic Plus, but this is a great place to get started if you're learning preservation, as most of what you take into raid is the kind of stuff that you do in Mythic Plus. And of course, if you're looking to do delve content, this is also going to be great, as a lot of what you do in Mythic Plus, you will also do in delves. That being said, there's a table of contents down below if you are looking for anything in particular, and note that a video on positioning where I deep dive how to deal with positioning issues as preservation, and sort of a play-by-play video will be coming up later. This video's bound to be pretty long, and I don't want to keep people here for too long. Also, I'm going to always attempt to hover an ability, and when I do hover an ability, it'll appear in the top left side of the screen in case you are trying to pause the video and read it for yourself. I'll mention this again one more time later, but I figure it's worth mentioning now. So as an overview, Preservation is a healing spec that uses nature, time, and fire magic to heal players and harm enemies. It's a mixture of setup and reaction healing, allowing players to use its core spell Echo to replicate spells onto allies, allowing for a healing combo game that is unlike any other healer in World of Warcraft. The general pros to Preservation is that you have a healing profile and tool for every situation, including a best-in-slot Dispel with Cauterize, excellent damage and good single target damage when able to blast for a healer, mana management that is easy to weave into your rotation, and some of the best external defensives in the game with Zephyr and Time Dilation that gives tanks the Brewmaster Stagger, which we will definitely cover later. The cons, though, in an overview, are range issues. While very manageable, are challenging for new players or with teammates who refuse to move. I find the range issues on Evoker to be more of a core aspect of it, and with Preservation you get a lot of cool moves that only work up to 25 and 30 yards. But it will be a hurdle if you're not used to positioning. If you've played like support in League of Legends competitively, you probably have an idea of how this will work, but trust me, give it some time and you can definitely clear those hurdles. Another con is the cooldown management and thinking. Prez has a lot of buttons that they use to actively heal, but we only have one move that's always online, and that's Living Flame. Everything else is a charge system, a cooldown, or a special resource. Now, you have enough of these to comfortably heal anything, but you do need to play them intelligently. You're going to have to juggle your cooldowns and find combos to make things work, and it's not always pretty, and sometimes you have to make something work that doesn't feel quite right. Preservation requires a lot of flexibility. Now, this is a con. It has great crowd control, but tough timers on those cooldowns. Now, you have everything you want. You have Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet, which are going to be a knock-up and a knockback. You have a Sleepwalk, which can be used for skips and is incredible in PvP. You get a gigantic stun, you get an interrupt, a range kick, and you even have a move that increases the duration of a crowd control effect. What a powerful kit. But a lot of these moves go from 40-second cooldowns to a minute and a half or 2 minutes, with Sleepwalk being the only one with a shorter cooldown. So this tends to be a bit of a problem. You have great crowd control, but you need trigger discipline too. Can't just let that stuff rip all the time. We won't be going over raid a ton in this guide. Preservation can be a struggle to heal a whole raid if you're not positioned correctly, but an easy way to get over this is to simply make sure you're assigned to an area that you tend to heal. I love healing melee personally in my own raid. Sometimes I get assigned to range and I get to like say heal to the left and right of me, and that tends to fix the issue. But note that if you're not positioning well in raid, it's going to be a little tricky, but you're also a smart healer and a lot of your moves will automatically go where they need to go. So you don't actually have to worry too much about range, you just need to be in a position where you can hit the targets you need to hit, and the heals will oftentimes do their job on their own. That doesn't make it easy, but it does simplify some of the range issues that players might be worried about. Let's talk about Preservation stats. Now, I just want to note this is beta, I don't really have the stats that I want, and everything scales in the beta, so you might be seeing a PvP trinket down here that was simply so that I could get some stats that I wanted. No more. So do not look at my left side as like a good definitive gear list, because it absolutely isn't. But I do have my stat weights somewhere where I would like them, so it is worth talking about. Intelligence is our main stat. It increases the power of your spells. Not a lot to talk about there. In terms of stat allocation, the only place I want you dropping intellect is potentially your trinket slots, where you may drop them for a secondary stat. That's totally fine. but I wouldn't drop more than that. Intelligence going up is generally the biggest power increase that you will see. Your mastery will increase the healing you do to your allies when your health bar is the same percentage as theirs or higher. So if the teammate is your health percentage or lower, you will get mastery on them. This is actually a really powerful mastery, and even without a lot of mastery points in to the secondary stat, you still get a good chunk of extra healing by simply activating your mastery. This is Boolean logic though, true or false. So, and it's snapshots. So what that means is if you're at 49% health and your ally, your healing's at 50%, no mastery for them. And let's say you put a heal over time on them, and then you suddenly have more health in them because you heal yourself. Well, that doesn't work either. It's snapshotted with no mastery. You can't retroactively turn on your mastery and heal other people. Now, as a benefit, you always receive your mastery, but it's very important to heal yourself. We do have a defensive called Renewing Blaze that essentially heals 100% of the damage we take over 8 seconds. That can be really nice for making sure your health bar is above others, as well as giving yourself a full potency echo, a normal echo. You'll hear about that later, so that when you're doing these healing combos, you're always getting a little more healing, and that can really help you maintain mastery. Now, mastery is more healing with more stats, so this tends to be a very raid loved stat, but don't feel bad if your mastery isn't super high. The spec can work without it, but if you need more healing, mastery is the place to go. Next up, we have Critical Strike. This can double the effectiveness of damage or healing. What's not to love? We're not going to have a lot of extra stats in Season 1, so if you get critical, sweet. If you don't get critical, that's okay. You might sack this for versatility as a raider, or you might sack versatility in favor of crit as a raider, but this isn't a stat you're going to be hiking up too high early on. But if you can get bonus crit, we love bonus crit. Haste is an interesting stat. This will reduce our general global cooldown as well as any spells with green text on them, which for us is Temporal Anomaly and Reversion. Listen, our basic heal of Living Flame is like a 2-second cast time with no haste. So hitting anywhere between like 18 and 21%, 22% is going to get you that 1.7, maybe 1.6 cast time, which is nice. Now, Living Flame isn't the end of the world. We have ways to make it faster. The problem is more too low of haste, and Preservation is a bit too slow. Too much haste, and while your essence regeneration and your cooldowns and your global cooldown will thank you, those stats are probably used elsewhere. So I like to hit that 18 to 21% mark. And for those of you who are like, wait a minute, I don't want to stack a ton of haste, you can, but hear me out. A lot of Preservation is prepping a heal and then slamming a heal at the right time. You don't really need haste to time something correctly. You just need to know how long the cast is. And the timing isn't super strict, so I feel like haste isn't something you need a ton of. There are people that run some pretty high haste builds, and they do work. I just don't think it's the best stat to be dumping a ton of your points into. So if you get haste, good. Try to hit around that sweet spot. If you're a little lower, you're a little higher, not the end of the world, but your stats can be better used elsewhere. So let's talk about versatility. This is the PvP stat, obviously, so if you're a PvP player like myself, you're going to have a ton of this when you go into arenas, but it's a really good Mythic Plus and Delving stat because it's going to increase our damage and our healing done and reduce incoming damage. Versatility is a hard one to math out early. I don't know how much we're going to have, but this 14% that I'm rocking feels pretty good for the start. And of course, if I wanted to get rid of some of my mastery, I could always drink a potion or something that increases my versatility instead to better help counterbalance that. In Raid, a lot of people will sack their versatility for other stats. That's totally fine. I like to walk around with a jewelry swap or two, so that when I'm in Raid, I maybe go a little higher in the mastery. When dungeons, I have a smoother amount of mastery to versatility ratio. You're gonna have to feel this one out, but versatility is a nice stat. I really like it. Now, if you're a PvP player, I tend to find that mastery is the second stat I go for, with haste as the one that I get when I can't get mastery. That seems to work the best for me. I find that mastery does wonders in PvP, and because you always give yourself mastery healing, makes you quite a bit tanky. I've been dove on by tons of demon hunters and people in Season 4 and Season 3, and you can just keep yourself alive for an unbelievable amount of time. You also have some PvP talents that do a good job of that as well. So I like the mastery there. You could probably run a high crit if you wanted to be dangerous, because Prez has a lot of damage being a healer, so you might be able to do something fun there, but I'll leave that to the PvP experts to math out. I'm just simply letting you all know, for those of you who are casual PvP enjoyers. And I absolutely love this thing in Battleground Blitz, but I'll probably make a whole video on that. When it comes to the like alternative stats like avoidance, leech, and speed and all of that, here's the thing. Leech is nice, but avoidance tends to be best in slot when you're pushing keys, but leech is really nice if you want your mastery. Leech might even be really good in raid as long as avoidance isn't needed to survive a mechanic. But never take speed. Like, speed is nice, we love speed, but we have this whole jump air dash we can do, right? You can use your wings and just dash forward. So you kind of have an always online movement ability. You do not need speed. So I never recommend adding speed to your build unless you're a PvP player, in which case speed is best in slot, and that's what we run. So now let's go through some of the abilities. And I just want to note, if I'm talking about ability, I'll try to hover the move on, say, my frames here, and it'll be in the top left if you need to read it. I'm my own editor for all these videos, and it's a little hard to like punch in and get a thumbnail of every single one of these with sort of the limited time I have. So pause the video, zoom in if you have to, and I'll try to make sure I hover it so that it's easy to grab the info on. Also, I'm sorry if I'm in Bastion in Shadowlands. This is like the only quiet place in the beta that I could get away to. So we're going to start with the damage buttons and the damage rotation because this is very, very, very easy to understand. And then we can move into the more complicated side of the class, which is healing. Starting with Living Flame. This is a basic heal and a basic damage button with a kind of long cast time. Fun fact about this move, if it's damage, it'll send out in a straight line towards the target. And if I heal somebody with it, it'll like wiggle instead. A very cool move. I really like Living Flame aesthetically. You're going to see a lot of this move in the War Within. Good to be familiar with it. Azure Strike is a basic move of ours that is mana positive to spam. And it can be cast while moving. Very cool animation, and because of the way we talent, it'll slow the target, which is why you see immune tags above this training dummy. You don't use this for anything else other than you gotta move or slow something, as even in AoE with the talent that makes it hit 3 targets, it doesn't do that much damage. Once upon a time it did more damage than the Living Flame, not anymore. So you're just gonna send out Living Flames for your damage. Azure Strike when you can't press Living Flame due to like maybe a setup you have. And that's about it. That's all you're going to use Azure Strike for. Fire Breath is our first empowered spell, so I want to talk about this. There's a lot of text up there. You charge up empowered spells like this. And they have 3 levels, 4 if you talent Font of Magic, and each level kind of augments the spell a little bit, and that's what this tooltip will read. So it does more damage than it says on the tooltip, but it's going to do 667,000 damage-ish. But if we use it at a level 1, it'll do a little bit of damage instantly and then more damage over 24 seconds. So the rest of that damage is located in the damage over time. At level 2, it's pretty even. It's all half of it up front and then half of it is the damage over time. At level 3, most of it's up front and then a little over time. And then level 4 is like a massive amount of damage up front and then a very small amount of damage over time. Fire Breath is a very powerful move, and it can be used as a heal as well with the Wavy talent. And it also gives you Leaping Flames. The more you charge it, the more Living Flames you'll throw the next time you Living Flame. It's a really, really cool move. I love Fire Breath. You'll rip thread off a tank at least once with this in your lifetime. At 10 out of 10, love Fire Breath. Disintegrate is our first essence ability. This is our special resource located below my health and mana bar on the left there. Disintegrate will cost 3 essence. We channel it and we do ice damage, which means that we slow the target and you do damage over time. We do take a talent that makes us channel faster and a talent that makes it do more damage. But it doesn't just do more damage, it also restores our mana. Disintegrate's a very nice move. I'm really happy to have it in my kit because, again, the damage is quite nice on it, but this is our main method of getting mana back, so I find it to be incredibly useful. Some people don't talent the mana talent, but when you're learning, I really think it's a good one to go for. Next up in the basic kit, we have Deep Breath. Deep Breath is a 2-minute cooldown that just does a ton of damage to everything in the area. It is a line attack, and this and Dream Flight, your 2 breath spells, you're actually immune to crowd control while you're up in the air. Now, some like story sequence stuff might pull you out of it, but Deep Breath, like if something's fearing you, if something's stunning you or knocking you up, it just can't happen. You can't be slept, you can't be silenced, nothing. Deep Breath can be used to parry certain mechanics like that, and it's very cool. It also is talented into a stun, and get this, it's a 3-second AoE stun. Very powerful stuff. And it looks super cool. You fly up in the air and you blast down black dragon magic. Very cool. Love this one. There is Engulf, which is a new move for Flameshaper, the hero talent. It can be used for damage or for healing. This will do more damage to the target with the more periodic effects on them. And so it is possible to say like, get a fire breath on something and a disintegrate, and then you hit like an engulf, and it just does a bunch of damage. And it can spread the fire breath and dream breath around, but it's mostly used for healing. It can do a lot of damage very quickly, so if you get the opportunity to just blow something up, I love it. But it is a really good healing move. So while this is nice in damage and it's got a bunch of functions, I'm going to suggest for most of you use it as a healing move until you are really, really comfortable with it. So the damage rotation, and you're going to hear me talk about this later, is simply put, throw a temporal anomaly, more on that move later. I recommend full charging a fire breath, and then casting disintegrate to get your mana back, and then throw that living flame if there's no healing needed. Maybe keep doing damage. That's it. Send your deep breath as a stun or as a damage move if you don't need it as a stun. That's it. That's all there's going on here. It's not a very complicated damage spec. There are some smaller optimizations you can make, which we'll be talking about as we hit the hero talents, but that is it. A lot of the time as Prez, you are setting up a heal with Temporal Anomaly to kind of prepare for incoming damage, and then you can drop your damage. And because Fire Breath can be talented to additionally heal, slamming a bunch of enemies will heal your allies. So there's a nice little feedback loop here. So get your damage down and react to incoming damage. It's very satisfying. It's very easy. You'll get the flow of the damage buttons before you know it. And when in doubt, you can just throw living flames at a single target, and my god, you are helping. So don't ever feel bad about just whipping living flames. It does quite a bit of damage. Now let's go over the healing of preservation. We already talked about living flame being a damaging move and a healing move, and that if you use it on enemies, it fires in a cool little straight line. If you send it towards an ally, it does this cute little wiggle. That's great. But also, let's talk about Essence Burst. Whenever you use a living flame or a reversion, you have a 20% chance on living flame and a 15% chance on reversion to get an Essence Burst, which will give you a free cast of Disintegrate, Emerald Blossom, or Echo. This is very useful coming up and is just a core part of the kit that when you get Essence Burst, you can usually use those to help with your combo game. You've heard me probably say combo game now, and what are you talking about? Echo is our core move in our kit. It's 2 essence, a little bit of mana, and it does a tiny little heal. And what this does is it replicates a heal. So if I say put an echo on this guard, and then say let's heal myself, let's pretend I don't have an echo on me, I heal and they heal, which is pretty cool. But note that these are real living flames, which means it's rolling an essence burst 2 times, because the one that hits me and the one that hits that guard both roll the dice for a 20% chance. This also counts for reversions. If you have a bunch of reversions out, they can also roll a chance at getting yourself an Essence Burst. But Echo doesn't stop there. It can replicate any of our spells that are non-emergency. So it doesn't replicate Dream Flight, it doesn't replicate Emerald Communion, Rewind, and Stasis. Echo also doesn't replicate itself, so you can't echo an echo. And if you say, let's say we charge up a Fire Breath and we use our Leaping Flames, note that Leaping Flames that don't hit enemies will heal us right there, but it didn't consume my Echo. Very useful. You're fighting a boss, you can full send the damage, and the Leaping Flames will go find people that need healing without burning your combo. Very cool. But Echo will allow you to double up heals. So Reversion has a talent called Grace Period, where you get 10% bonus healing. But if you have 2 reversions on you because you used Echo Reversion, you're now getting 20% bonus healing. So there's a lot of fun combinations you can play with Echo. It's also useful for, say, cleave healing. Let's say all 3 of us are hurt. I can Echo 1, Echo myself, and then Verdant Embrace this guard, and all 3 of us just healed. That's one of the most powerful parts about Echoes. You can use them to prepare yourself, or you can use them to cleave heal. And whenever you do bigger healing combos, and we'll talk all about combos later, I want to note that putting a full-sized Echo on yourself will not be overwritten by a weaker Echo, and this can be a good way to make sure that you're getting your mastery. What do you mean by weaker Echo? Temporal Anomaly has an ability attached to it called Resonating Sphere, which will produce a 30% Echo to the first 5 allies that the Temporal Anomaly passes through. This is one of the core parts of preservation. When you throw a Temporal Anomaly, you deliver echoes. These echoes when with your talents combined is a 45% replicated heal. So I like to call it a half echo and round up. So instead of the normal 105, you get less. Now I can't actually hit these people with temporal anomaly echoes for whatever reason. They're not coded to get hit by that. But what this means is that you can throw a temporal anomaly, say through a lobby of players. Wait a minute, I should just go to Orgrimmar. Editor me. Cut to the bit. So here's a good example. I throw this temporal anomaly through the crowd. The shield will continue to deliver diminishing results as it goes, but the first 5 people that got hit by my temporal anomaly will all receive living flames. So you can use this to say throw a big temporal anomaly and then hit a reversion and have a pretty high chance at getting an essence burst while hitting a bunch of people with, say, that heal over time effect from reversion or that grace period I talked about. I'm going to go into reversion in a second, but temporal anomaly is the bread and butter of preservation dungeon healing. This move is also very thick. You might have noticed it hits a ton of targets, and it really does hit a ton of targets. So when people aren't, say, clumped up nicely, a well-sent temporal anomaly can hit quite a wide array of players. And of course, if you can't hit somebody in range, I recommend that you just echo them. So you can temporal anomaly one person, echo the rest of the players, hit your whatever heal you're doing, and you'll still get that ranged player that's in double Narnia staying away from you. Let's talk about reversions finally. So on its own, reversion is a simple heal over time. It has a chance to extend itself when it crits up to a cap of 12 seconds, and it's an okay heal. Nothing too crazy going on, but the talents going on with this move are what make it so special. We've already talked about the fact that baseline, it has a 15% chance to grant an essence burst. But also, grace period, we already talked about, gives a 10% bonus healing to a player that has reversion on them, 20% if it's a double reversion. But there's also golden hour. That's the talent that is at the start of this tooltip. Reverse an ally's injuries, instantly healing them for 15% of damage taken in the last 5 seconds and an additional blah over 15.6 seconds. What makes this talent so good is that the game just sort of writes down what a player's been taking, and it just looks 5 seconds back and heals it up. It doesn't care if there was a shield, it doesn't care if they took it to the face, and it doesn't care if they healed. It just knows how much they took. This makes it an exceptionally good talent for healing tanks up, as well as players who have been taking a large amount of damage. Echo reversion will also just do it twice. So yeah, if somebody took, I don't know, like 5 million damage and you hit an echo reversion, 15% of that, 1.5 million, I think, no, 750,000. I can't do math, but yes, you will be able to get 15% twice back to back, essentially healing back 30% of the damage they just took and whatever else happened in 5 seconds. You can use this in your combos. You can use this to end combos when there's nothing really going on. And it has a bonus talent with Life Spark. Life Spark is a tier set we had in Season 1 and in Season 4 that reversions have a chance to give you an instant cast Living Flame that instantly deals, it doesn't instantly, well, it's instant, and it'll do 50% increased healing and damage. That is a lot of damage and healing. And so by having a reversion out, all the players that are, you see their health ticking right now, every single one of them is receiving bonus healing, and then I can throw an instant cast Living Flame, and it hit 900,000 non-critical. So you can see that's going to be almost 2 million healing on a crit. I have 5 million health, so if we echo and got a double critical, I full heal someone. Yeah, lots of different possibilities with reversions and with this Life Spark move. And if you want to know one of my favorite uses of reversion, it really is, hey, nothing's happening with this temporal anomaly. I'm about to get temporal anomalies cooldown back. Echoes last longer than the cooldown of temporal anomaly. I'll just be like, hey, there's nothing to heal. I hit reversion. People start having a heal over time on them. I can throw another temporal anomaly. And now let's say some damage does come in. I hit a Dream Breath. If we imagine this is a dungeon party, the 5 people that I hit with this, or the 4 to 5 people I hit, now have a 1.5 times Dream Breath with a bonus 10 to 20% healing on top of that. Beautiful stuff. So reversion gets a workout if you use it correctly, but if you don't talent for things like grace period, you might just use it to farm up those instant cast Living Flames, or simply just use it for golden hour. No matter what, it's a great move. All right, next on the empowered spells list, we have Dream Breath. This one works the exact same as Fire Breath. So if you tap fire this at a level 1, it'll provide a heal over time. If you charge it up, it'll be more upfront healing. Dream Breath is best used, in my opinion, as a level 1 ability, and you can charge it up more if you need more upfront healing immediately. And in the rare scenario that there's a disaster and the only move you have left is Dream Breath, you can charge up Dream Breath for a pretty fatty heal. I love Dream Breath, it's great, and Flameshaper players are going to be using this move a lot, so you're going to have to get nice and comfortable with it. Spirit Bloom is a wonderful spell. It's also one of our main smart heals, so it'll interact with echoes very efficiently in an attempt to not heal all of the same players if there are people who are hurt. And Spirit Blooms, the more you charge it, the more targets it hits. It's a big single target heal, and it'll just launch, find its targets, and heal them. Now, if you're running Chronowarden, this move will also be a heal over time for 30% of what it hits. So if you imagine you throw a temporal anomaly, you hit a full charge Spirit Bloom, everyone's getting a Spirit Bloom, and it gets that like 45% echo, that all turns into a heal over time, a massive amount of healing. You can also get a talent that makes this a 20-second cooldown instead of a 30-second cooldown. What talent that I love very dearly. Emerald Blossom is another essence spender of ours. This is very useful if you're running the Blossom moveset, and I don't tend to run Blossom in Raid, and it might be more viable in Dungeons now, which is great news, but I'm gonna have to send you to a Blossom specialist for that one, as I don't tend to theorycraft the Blossom builds very much, but Emerald Blossom will heal 3 or up to 5 players if you talent for it, around wherever you target the Blossom. It'll also, with the talent Panacea, heal you a little bit, no matter where you send it. And you can send it off into the wilds and heal people with it. I'm not going to go over these talents much later, but Fluttering Seedlings will allow Blossoms to send out these little seedlings that heal, and then Field of Dreams gives them a chance to have any of those seedlings create an additional Emerald Blossom, and you can see where this is going. And then Ouroboros means the manual echoes that you drop will power up your next Emerald Blossom. And then finally, Cycle of Life. After casting 3 blossoms, Field of Dreams or natural Emerald Blossoms will sprout up a little seed that gathers 10% of your healing over 8 seconds, and then it blossoms and it kind of delivers the copied healed evenly among targets within 30 yards. Cycle of Life is a part of that Blossom build that you see in raids. It's very fun. I recommend you try it out once you're comfortable with the spec. It's a very cool alternative way to play the game, and I think Blossom is absolutely sick. It's just not my specialty. So I want to tell you guys about that. I'm just not the one to go to for that. We already talked about Echo, but that's your other essence spender. So the next move we're going to talk about is Verdant Embrace. This move is tethered to a talent that we have, Call of Ysera. Verdant Embrace increases the healing of your next Dream Breath by 40% or your next Living Flame by 100%. I don't typically use it on Living Flames unless it's PvP, but you use it for your Dream Breath all the time. So let's say we want to do a combo. We might Verdant Embrace ourselves and then throw a Temporal Anomaly and then hit that Dream Breath so that we get a nice fat Dream Breath on as many people as possible. Verdant Embrace can also be used to say jump to a target. So I can say hit somebody with it and I'll jump to them and heal that player, healing myself a little bit on the way. This also will give you and that target Life Bind, which shares roughly 40% of your own healing. It's less if it's done through a Temporal Anomaly. It only lasts 5 seconds, but that means if you have any healing running from your defensive Renewing Blaze or your big emergency heal, Emerald Communion, which technically just heals you, you can share that healing with other people for some wildly strong combinations. If you've never seen it, it is extremely cool to throw out a Temporal Anomaly, hit a Verdant Embrace, and then Emerald Communion, and you're just healing a bunch of players for an absolutely ton. Big fan, highly recommend. Verdant Embrace, we have more healing tools now. I used to caution people that using Verdant Embrace just for your Dream Breath could be dangerous if you're pugging, because sometimes you need the extra heal given from Verdant Embrace, but these days we have enough healing tools that I don't feel like it's a big deal, but getting used to casting Verdant Embrace before hitting Dream Breath does take a little getting used to, but once you're used to it, you get a lot of value out of it. Verdant Embrace is a pretty versatile spell, so get comfortable with it. I'm going to go over the hero talent moves later, like Engulf and Chrono Flame. So if you see this on the bar and you're wondering why I'm not talking about it, I'm going to go over that when I talk about hero talents. But it's time to move into the emergency or big cooldowns. I like to call them emergency because typically speaking, they're great in emergencies, but they're big cooldowns. Therefore, they don't work inside of stasis and they don't work with echoes. So very important to remember that. Stasis is the move that usually confuses people the most, and I don't want to confuse you here. It stores up to 3 spells that are helpful. Now remember, if you send out Leaping Flames by doing damage, that doesn't get caught in Echo, that doesn't get caught in Stasis either. But if you do any amount of healing, that's like manual, like you clicked on someone and healed, Stasis can grab it. My rule for this move is try to load it up with 2 of the 3 big ones. The big ones being Spirit Bloom, Dream Breath, and Temporal Anomaly. Now, even if you just get like a big Spirit Bloom in here, that's fine, but trying to get 2 to 3 of these in here is definitely the play. Now, it doesn't incur a cooldown when you start it, which means raiders, you can store 2 Temporal Anomalies in here and then hold it until raid starts, throw a Temporal Anomaly before the pull starts, and then you can send out 3 more a moment later and get these quadruple Temporal Anomaly setups for some of the strongest healing possible in this entire game. It's really only good at the start of a pull, as using it in the middle of a pull, while sometimes viable, is dubious because you can't really heal while setting up the gigantic Temporal Anomaly. I just want to mention that here because it's a very cool setup. But yeah, store this up with 3 spells. If you have a Temporal Anomaly in the front, the spell will be inherently burstier. If you have a Temporal Anomaly in the back of the stasis, it works like a combo extender. You can throw out a Temporal Anomaly, do some healing, let loose the stasis, and then a Temporal Anomaly comes out. So it sort of helps you extend into the next section of healing. But yeah, load it up. So let's load this up with a full Spirit Bloom. Let's say we're all taking damage right now. Boom, I hit the Spirit Bloom, and then let's say we're doing damage, okay, full charge of Fire Breath, right? And then, oh, I need to heal more, so I throw out this Leaping Flame, right? And then I'm going to end it with a Temporal Anomaly. That'll prepare my team, and then let's say no damage comes in, I hit Reversion, like, okay, we're chilling. And then I'm doing damage, I'm playing the game, I'm healing people, but once that 3rd spell is loaded, I have 30 seconds to use Stasis, and its cooldown has finally incurred. Now, let's say it's another moment of healing. We take a load of damage, I can send out a Temporal Anomaly, I can blast my Stasis, and then throw out another Temporal Anomaly, ready for the next round of damage. Stasis is a very cool move. Now, it's easy to overthink this move. Until you are comfortable with it, I recommend just launching it the moment you need to heal and set up like a Temporal Anomaly and a Dream Breath in there or something. Just load it up and then press it the next time you need to heal. If you don't need to heal, it'll just spit out of you at the end. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you get good at it, you can do things like heal one phase of a mechanic with your stasis, and then heal the next phase by releasing the stasis, and then you have all your cooldowns back up to maybe heal through another phase of damage because you didn't have to use them again to heal through the mechanic. It's cool. It can be very big brain. And also for Flameshaper enjoyers, it can fit an engulf in it. But if that sounds complicated when we get to Flameshaper, don't even worry about it. Just use engulf to heal when you start and you'll be fine. But this does work with echoes and it does work with stasis, so I figured it's worth mentioning. Tip the Scales is an ability that we can use that when we activate it, it just remains active forever. Note that you can use this as a pre-pull in a dungeon and it will reset the cooldown on Tip the Scales and let you keep the buff. But this makes your next empowered spell instant cast at the highest level. Tip the Scales is very strong. If you're new to the spec, use it like an emergency heal, right? To immediately heal with, say, a Temporal Anomaly. But as you get more comfortable with it, you can end up using it for a Fire Breath. It's a really nice way to rip thread off your tank at the start of a pull. So you'll probably do that once or twice. It's very funny, but please try not to terrorize your tank. Yes, we can terrorize our tank if we are doing enough damage. So just at the start of a pull, have some trigger discipline of Tip the Scales Fire Breath. But middle of the pull, you don't have to worry about it. But I typically use Tip the Scales for Spirit Bloom or Dream Breath when I need healing. Also note, if you're a Chronowarden player, that this move is going to kickstart a couple of abilities of yours. So you're not going to be able to use it as loosely as I do. I tend to just let this thing rip. If you're playing Chronowarden, you're going to want to think about where you send this because it's a much more important cooldown. But we'll get to that later. Next up on our emergency list, we have Emerald Communion. Emerald Communion is a big heal where you heal yourself, restoring 20% of your own health and 2% of your mana every 0.8 seconds for 4.2 seconds. Any amount of overhealing is transferred to an injured ally, and this is smart healing. So just using an Emerald Communion on its own will do some smart healing and help people out, but there's a lot more going on here. Remember when we talked about Verdant Embrace? This move will also give somebody a life bind, sharing 40% of healing. So you can use that for a big setup where you throw a stasis, you hit people with, or you throw out a bunch of echoes, you Verdant Embrace, and then you Emerald Communion to heal everybody. Note that if you do this combo through a Temporal Anomaly Echo, it will be significantly weaker, but it's still quite a lot of healing, so it's not like a bad thing to use. There's also a talent, Rush of Vitality, that'll increase your health by 20% when you use it and for 15 seconds. So you actually have that bonus health for a little bit, but your health going up means Emerald Communion heals more. This is sort of a best in slot talent to make Emerald Communion better. However, you might be thinking to yourself, but Bowser, wait a minute. What about this one? You were able to move while communing with the dream. Only take this in PvP. In PvP, your hover charges can be precious and that you might need them to, say, get away from the enemy, but you don't need this. Please learn how to do this. I hear this every season of somebody telling me they can't learn this. You can learn this. I believe in you. Press hover, then hit Emerald Communion. Congratulations. This was taught to me in season 1 of Dragonflight, and I've never forgotten about it. It's super useful. Please hover into Emerald Communion with a stronger Emerald Communion, not a weaker one. I could cry. It's a very good move. Love it. On to Rewind. Rewind uses the same thing that Reversion's Golden Hour does, and that in the last 5 seconds, you can heal back 33% of damage taken. Now, in Raid, it's 33%, but outside of Raid, it is 66%. There is a talent that makes it a 3-minute cooldown instead of a 4-minute, or grants 2 charges of the move at half potency, meaning 33%. Now, all those talents are good if you need more Rewind, but Rewind is a big spell. Like, you use this to save lives when there's nothing else left, but it also allows you to save lives when they had no business living. Rewind is incredibly powerful, and again, it does not care if damage has been healed, if there was a shield or anything. It simply looks at the damage a player has taken in the last 5 seconds and it rewinds it. Now, it is important to note, and you'll see it even here in Ogremar, if I hit rewind, you'll notice it pulses the heal, right? And no one's taking damage here, so it's just doing minimum damage. It does pulse back that damage over time. So it's not a snap the fingers and it's instantly healed. It's over that duration of pulsing that it heals back everything. All right, now we need to talk about Dreamflight, which does require me changing some talents out here, so don't mind that. But Dreamflight is just like Deep Breath, a breath spell, so you're completely immune to crowd control during it. This move is a beautiful, uncapped AoE heal that you can hit an entire raid with. But great news, Green enjoyers, it's 100% stronger outside of raid now. This truly means that you can use this in dungeons and get quite a lot of value out of it. And it's really pretty. I love Dreamflight, and it's only a 2-minute. So feel free to run this if you want to get experimental with your builds. I mean, it is a lot of healing, and it's not bad in any way, shape, or form. And it does count as a periodic effect on the target, meaning that it does interact with things like Engulf. Before I get into utility and defensives and all the other stuff, I want to talk about the Dispels really quick. We do have a standard Dispel Naturalize. When you're not Preservation, it's just Poison. When you're Preservation, it's Poison and Magic. This is the same Dispel as every other Dispel in the game. The only issue is it's 30 yards instead of 40 yards. This is rarely a problem, but if you played in Season 3 or Season 4 of Dragonflight, you'll probably remember in For Rock, that can be a bit of a pain, but honestly, it's not too big of a deal. Your Dispels can go in stasis, but Naturalize needs to actually dispel something to go in stasis. Cauterize does not, but you can do this like pseudo mass dispel with Cauterize, but it's only so good, and you don't use it all the time. It's incredibly niche, but I want you to know, in case you ever have to use it, Cauterize is a 1-minute cooldown, but only when it dispels something. That'll do a chunky little heal, but it removes poisons, bleeds, curses, and diseases. This is the best dispel in the game. It removes all of them too, by the way. So PvP players rejoice that the Affliction Warlock has put 10 million things on your DPS and the rogue has bled them to oblivion. Hit Cauterize. It's over. This is a great move. Just know that it exists, know that it's worth taking every time. And if you have any augmentation or devastation friends that don't take Cauterizing Flame, I give you permission to judge them. I just need that to be out there. Now, before we talk all utility, I do want to cover Hover. I've mentioned it a few times now. Hover is our movement ability. Hover lets us dash in any direction we want, or we can use it in place. I'm going to go absolutely flying due to a talent that I have on Flameshaper, so you won't normally go this far, but after you hover, you can actually cast while moving. You just can't use empowered spells while moving. So this is super useful for setting up and moving into a pull and getting things done, but you can't hover and say Fire Breath or hover and Spirit Bloom. You're going to have to plant for those, but you can also use hover in place. I love when this is something you got to teach everyone, but let's say you don't want to dash off a stage, but you want to use hover. You can run, let go, tap hover in place, and then start moving again, and you don't dash. Takes a little getting used to. For those of you who play Tekken, it feels like a while rising input. That won't make sense to anybody who doesn't play Tekken, but I like to say it anyways. So that's hover, incredibly useful move. If you run Chronowarden, it turns into warp, and it's still hover, but now you can like dash through time and space and dodge things. It's super cool. We'll show that one later. Let's go over defensives really quick. On the personal side of things, you have Obsidian Scales. It's a 30% DR, lasts 12 seconds. You can have 2 charges of it, minute and a half recharge. It's great. Renewing Blaze, this is a minute and 30 normally. I have it talented down to a minute. When this is active, any damage you take will be 100% repaired over 8 seconds. So if you take 1,000,000 damage, you're going to heal that 1,000,000 damage back in the next 8 seconds. Incredibly useful spell, but in Flameshaper, there is the talent that lets you put a 50% version of this on an ally. Yes, you can put a Renewing Blaze on a tank. It's as insane as it sounds. Love this move. This is also very good for helping your mastery. If everyone's about to be taking damage, a Renewing Blaze might be all you need to stay on top of mastery and get your bonus healing. On the external side of things, other than Renewing Blaze in Flameshaper, Time Dilation. This move is gross. Time Dilation is a 1-minute cooldown that gives somebody a 50% DR. And what it means is 50% of the damage that they take is actually staggered over the next 10.4 seconds. Monk has this mechanic called stagger, and how it works is a certain amount of the damage that gets taken in, instead of hitting you in the face, instead just happens over time. It makes healing a tank a lot easier. It can save just about anybody's life. And if you use it on a monk, on like a brewmaster, it specifically pauses their stagger timer and allows some of the damage to go into time dilation instead for a little bit, which can help relieve some of the pain. It is useful on brewmasters for anyone who's curious. That being said, this is one of the best damage reductions in the game. I still think Discipline Priest has better externals with Power Word Barrier and 2 charges of Pain Suppression. Pain Suppression, though, is a 40% DR with a 3-minute charge time. So Time Dilation is a bit better than Pain Suppression in that regard, but I still give the award to Discipline Priest on the defensive side of things. Preservation coming in second place, though. Pretty good. You should be happy about that. So speaking of externals, it ain't no Power Word Barrier, but Zephyr. This is a 2-minute cooldown, and it lifts you up in your 4 nearest allies within 20 yards, and it reduces damage taken from area of effect, which means this is avoidance. Avoidance is weird. If it's a bomb, a circle, a swirly, dangerous wind that hits everybody, poison fields, icy, dangerous, arcane ground, whatever, Zephyr works on it. Genuinely, it works on a lot of things. But let's say it's a debuff put on everybody individually, or like a necrotic bolt volley that just is a bunch of missiles that hit everyone. It's not going to work on that. Throw around Zephyr and see where it goes. It'll do wonders for you, but it's only so good. The final one, which I can't really have footage of unless I put someone in a party, but is Rescue. Now, Rescue, I'm real with you, it's a 1-minute cooldown. Use this to reposition players that are not standing where you want them to. I'm not kidding. If there's some hunter who just will not sit still, or rather sit in front of you somewhere where you can heal them easily, rescue them. A lot of players will get the point that the whole reason you rescued them is because you need them to reposition. If they have a neural silencer or they continue to move out of position, you have to yell at them. I'm not kidding. It's not fun, but going into chat being like, hey, I need you to position in front of me, and pinging them and all that stuff. And if it doesn't work, I hate saying this because it sounds like elitist, but they're bad. And you shouldn't feel too bad that they're ruining the key because they don't want to move a little bit. It's not that hard. And some players will be happy that you rescued them because most spell casts aren't interrupted by rescue. Some still are, which I think is a bug, but other than empowered spells, you can pick up most players while they're casting, and they can keep doing their thing while you move them. This is actually was super useful when I was in the Eve Ascension tournament. I was able to move our Shadow Priest around, and she could like continue to hit Vamp Touch on everything while she was running around. but rescue does have a defensive component to it. Twin Guardians. You and your ally receive a health or equal to 30% of your maximum health for 5 seconds. It is personal though, so if your friend only has 1,000 health, they're getting a 30% of 1,000 health. So this is going to be based on the player, but we're not saying no to a 30% health shield for 5 seconds. You can use this to save your own life or somebody else's life pretty easily. I've also had other evokers rescue me. We survive a mechanic and then I re-rescue them to continue shielding a mechanic. It's pretty fun. I do have a macro that I will try to have linked down below that is a no harm target macro that instead of allowing you to mouse over only works on targeting on like a hard target. And that's because I have a lot of mouse over issues with rescue and this fixes all of them for me. So rescue is a fantastic defensive and repositioning tool. I use it often. Okay, onto utility and crowd control. You have a mass res, wahoo. Blessing of Bronze is going to give everyone in your party 15% of their movement skill reduced. So that allows our hover to be at a nice, wonderful 30-second recharge. This also counts for temporal compression, which we'll talk about later. Silly little thing you can do with that. So let's talk about some of the crowd control stuff that we have access to. You have a kick. Quell, 40-second cooldown, kind of unfortunate, but it's an interrupt, right? Stops a school of magic from being cast. Wonderful spell. If you hit something and you kick it, great. 10 out of 10. This adds to that trigger discipline thing I was talking about. Don't just use your kick for funsies. Use your kick when you know your team needs it. That's sort of the best advice I have for a 40-second healer kick. Oppressing Roar. This can be talented to also be a de-enrage, but this provides a debuff on a target that allows them to take 50% additional crowd control duration. So you can get Sigil of Silences that last forever. Your 3-second AoE stun can turn to a 4.5-second stun. You can get a Sleepwalk that lasts 10,000 years. It's great. Very useful in PvP, very useful in PvE. You're gonna love this thing. Keep it around. I don't have it on my bars right now, but Sleepwalk is right here. 15-second cooldown. Makes a target walk towards you and sleep for 20 seconds. In PvP, this is obviously less. This does have a PvP talent that allows it to be cast forever, like with no cooldown timer. It just increases the cast time. So if you want to tell that mage that polymorphed you that they need to go to bed, you can do so for multiple days if you would like to, until the DR catches up and then they polymorph you again. You scream at the top of your lungs, "No, I don't have trauma. I don't know what you're talking about." The next crowd control is Landslide. This is a root, a line root. You just cast this, it'll root things in place. The root can be broken. It's not the most useful, but you'll find places for it. It's also just unfortunately in the way of moving down this path. However, there is a talent that reduces Landslide's cooldown by 30 seconds and let it withstand more damage. But it's simple. It's a very simple move. It does what it says on the box. We have a racial in the form of Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet. And it's Wing Buffet, but let me have my fun. Tail Swipe will knock things up and a little bit outwards from you. Wing Buffet will send them just straight outwards. It'll like launch things. And they're pretty big actually. So lovely moves, great to use. And you have a talent right here that'll let you pick which one you'd rather be a 45-second cooldown. Most of the time it's Clobbering Sweep. You might find some dungeons or in PvP that you prefer keeping people off of you, which this is going to be a little bit better. But it's a great crowd control. It does a lot of work. Remember that knockups have no diminishing return. So let's say everybody stunned the mobs like a bazillion times, right? And there's like no chance of you stunning them anymore. You can always knock them up. So feel free to go for those if that helps. These are great. Keep them around. You can't really get rid of them, so you better have them on your bars or I'll find you. We already talked about Deep Breath, but we talent this into a stun. It's a very good stun. We like it. And finally, in the utility department, the last two is you have Fury of the Aspects. This is Bloodlust, the same Bloodlust as Time Dilation and Primal Rage and all the other ones. So, but ours is the best because it gives you the power of Rainbow Dragons, and that's way better than anything else on any faction or any other class. Just 10 out of 10. Tell your raid team you need to use the Rainbow Dragon power. Thank me later. I just, for disclaimer purposes, it's not actually statistically better than any of them. I just like rainbows and dragons. Soar is the final thing to talk about. This is a racial that just lets us fly. You get dragon riding with this. I love this as just somebody who likes dragons and the fantasy of being a dragon. This is super cool. Fly around to your heart's content. It does have the added benefit of launching you upwards. So if you are trying to climb something high, you can use the sword to kind of get there quicker. Kind of makes them faster than most classes at specifically dragon riding, which is probably why they'll never let us use them in races. That being said, it's very cool for gathering. It's very cool for getting around. I love it, but you can still get on a mount and fly around like a normal person if you want. I occasionally get on the Tazavesh glider because I just love that thing. So it's there if you want it. Now, there's also Visage form, and I got words to say. Look, it'll turn you into your normie form if you want to look at your normie form. There is this significant increase outside of combat health regeneration for your party. No, it's not. It has never felt significant. It has never done an amount of healing that I have cared about. I would rather just heal people up with normal spells and get essence bursts and use a hover charge than how little healing it does. It just doesn't feel impactful. And like, maybe it does more now with our bigger health bars and I'm wrong, but like, I don't know. I can't be a panda in a Visage form, and that makes me upset. And I'm here to be a dragon. So if you do want this, you can put this on your bar. I actually have it on my bar because unfortunately in PvP, you always get kicked back to normie form. And I prefer looking like a dragon, especially because that's the model I'm used to looking for. So I have this here specifically for PvP, just so I can turn back into a dragon. So now we're going to go over the talents. I did just go over all the moves. So if you missed that section and you feel like I'm going a little too fast here when I talk about moves I've already covered, you're going to want to go back a few sections and find the move that I'm talking about. And again, they tend to be in the top right. Here on the talent tree, they're going to be around my mouse cursor. We're going to go kind of quick here because I want to get to the hero talents. And I'm not going to go over every talent because some of them are less useful or I don't typically run. And I want to get this out of the way right now. If you're trying to learn this spec very competitively, right? Like you're trying to push top 0.1%, or you're trying to become like a Mythic plus, or a Mythic plus, excuse me, well, a Mythic plus healer or like a Mythic raider, you're going to need to make adjustments based on the encounters and the composition you're in. It's as simple as that. You're never going to be able to have a one size fits all build, not typically anyway. And so while I'm going to be giving a lot of suggestions, my suggestions tend to be towards newer players or to people who pug a lot. All players at a high level are going to need to adjust things based on their needs. So just remember that when I'm going through the talents. We'll start with the Evoker side of the tree. I recommend that you have all of these. I think you get these two for free, but always grab Landslide because this gets you to natural convergence, making your disintegrate channel faster so that you can get back to healing quicker. You can do more damage. Please grab this. Some people don't run it, but I'm going to recommend for beginners, you're basically always grabbing this. Obsidian Scales is our defensive. Permeating Chill is why we get a 50% speed slow on people. We get a slow on people when we use blue spell. So Disintegrate and Azure Strike will just slow people for us. This is very useful. This gives us 2 charges of our defensive. Here's our Dispel, right? Here's Verdant Embrace after it, which is an unbelievably important move. And I always recommend Enkindled. Living Flame doing 6% more damage and healing is pretty giga. And right to the corner of that, Cauterizing Flame, another very important ability. Scarlet Adaptation is a point that you can remove, but it's a lot of free damage. This sort of just helps you kickstart your damage. If you've been healing for a bit and you'll store all this extra healing, and then you can throw a Living Flame and deal all that damage up front. This does affect things like Leaping Flames, so this is very powerful. But if you're strapped for points and just need some more utility or something, you can get rid of it. I don't recommend it all the time, but if you have to, it's okay. You can get rid of it. Now, Innate Magic regenerates your essence faster. This does not feel very good unless you have a lot of haste. Not something I recommend that you run all the time. You might say in a Blossom build run it, so I tend to not grab this. And of course down here I tend to grab one of these. My talents are a little scuffed from playing beta, but yeah, reducing your cooldown of ACC ability, very nice. Fun ability in PvP, Recall. Dream Flight and Deep Breath, when reactivated, will send you back to where you were, which is very cool looking and very fun. But when you use this move in PvP or in PvE, you'll have a little bronze version of you wherever you were. So there is kind of a giant tell that you might warp back. So if you take this ability, you're sort of giving away that you have a 50-50, which is still a mix-up, but I figure I'd mention that for some of you. This is where a kick is. Please always take your kick. Unless you're raiding and you know you don't need your kick, this is a very useful ability. Over here is Ancient Flame. This gets taken a decent amount, especially when you need more just pure single target healing. Casting an Emerald Blossom or a Verdant Embrace reduces the cast time of your next living flame by 40%. Very useful, very cool. I try to always grab this in PvP because it's just that useful. So I highly recommend it if you play PvP. Instinctive Arcana is fun. It's up to 4% magic damage increase, but you don't need this. So if you're strapped for bonus points, remove them from Instinctive Arcana. Regenerative Magic, a Leech is nice, and you might think, oh, but Bowser, Leech is so good for our mastery. But as I said in the stats section, you have enough ways to keep your health bar up. This isn't worth the 3 talent points, right, to get all the way down to here. It's just not worth it. So you can run this if you'd like, but if you're looking for more points for a build, probably remove them from here if you need more healing. So we already talked about Tip the Scales earlier. 2-minute cooldown, instantly send an empowered spell at max level. What's not to love? You're always going to grab this. Please don't leave home without it. It also links to 2 very important talents, and inherent resistance of 8% magic damage reduced. That's just so good. And Draconic Legacy, your stamina is increased by 6%. Look, we used to not be the tankiest healer. We're a lot thicker than we used to be. This is a very helpful set of abilities. You're going to grab these basically every time. PvP players, you'll tend to dodge inherent resistance as you don't really need it, but it is there for us PvE players. Blast Furnace isn't needed. I really like it. You can move this talent point around if you're strapped for points, but Fire Breath having an additional 4 seconds of damage over time is more healing and more damage. We love that. Here's where Oppressing Roar is for those bigger CC abilities. Leaping Flames I've talked about a few times. Charge up your Fire Breath. Each charge level gives you an additional Living Flame. And as a reminder, if you use this on, say, a singular enemy, the extra Living Flames will seek out targets to heal if there's no other damage targets. This does not burn combos. This does maintain buffs like Call of Ysera without burning them. Super powerful stuff. I love Leaping Flames. There's a lot of cool tricks with it. And remember, every living flame is a real living flame. So yes, all of these will roll for Essence Burst. And then just below that is Terror of the Skies. Deep Breath will stun enemies for 3 seconds. Overall, your DN Rage is right here in case you need to grab it. And Unravel, which is a shield breaking move, is right here. Very useful if there's a lot of shields, but if there's not a lot of shields, you don't need to take Unravel, but it is there. Protracted Talons is such a bait. This talent isn't good. Azure Strike hitting one more target does sound like a damage increase, but it's never more than Living Flame, sadly. So unless you need to slow more targets, it's kind of useless. So I would avoid this one. It used to be that it did more damage and it made me happy, but it doesn't do more damage and there's no reason to grab it right now. So unfortunately, you'll probably leave that one cut out. Below Draconic Legacy is Renewing Blaze, which is a 1:30 defensive we already talked about. Extremely strong with Flameshaper. We'll be talking all about that in a minute. And then down here, you can either get 30 seconds off the cooldown, or you can have it heal back way faster, which might have some use cases with Flameshaper. So you're gonna have to decide if you want that 1 minute cooldown or if you want the faster healing on the target you give it to. And note, this doesn't reduce the duration of Renewing Blaze. It just means it heals back damage faster. So it's a very useful talent. So both of these will probably be useful in the War Within, depending on what you're running. Down here, Hover gets an additional charge. There is up here extending Hover's time. I like this talent, but sometimes you can get away without running this, and I'll show you why. But you kind of always want Aerial Mastery. You kind of always want 2 charges. Below this is 2 very unique talents. Time Spiral is a 2-minute that gives you and every ally within 40 yards the ability to cast their major movement ability 1 more time. This is like a Heroic Leaps and that one Demon Hunter move that dashes them forward and disengage, your Hover, etc. But for whatever reason, it gives priests Leap of Faith so they can pull another player. I don't know. Blizzard, I don't know, man. I'm not sure if that was the one. Spatial Paradox is a 3-minute, but it gives you and another friendly healer 100% bonus range for 10 seconds. Very useful. It's like a 10-second hover and a 3-minute cooldown with a ton of range on it. That might not sound very useful, but there are times where I wish I could have an additional hover charge, and this allows you to do it. It's a little niche, but imagine you're playing with players that just don't want to position around you, or you know that Boomkin and that Hunter are going to be on other sides of the planet, and it's finally time you must heal them, and they're not positioning for you. Spatial Paradox will save the day, right? So cool, not always needed, but very fun, and I'm happy it's here. It used to be augmentation only, and it's here now. Down here on the green side of things, Sleepwalk is right here in case you need to grab this for dungeon skips. There's a high chance you do need to grab this for dungeon skips, so I'm going to get your claws on this one pretty quickly. Attune to the Dream, your healing done and received are increased by 6%. That's a must grab. Bountiful Bloom, Emerald Blossom heals 2 additional allies. Only really useful in the Blossom build or if you're running Ouroboros. This can be useful, but I tend to sack it for better pathing to get extended flight, but it is possible to get rid of extended flight and only put 1 point here in Bountiful Bloom, and that'll give you 1 more free point to do something with. So if you can deal with losing some of your hover time, might have something a little more flexible if you do that. So just something to consider. Panacea, Emerald Blossom, and Verdant Embrace will instantly heal you. It doesn't seem like a lot, but this does scale with green magic now, which down below, green spells restore 10% more health. So you're going to get a decent amount of healing out of Panacea now. It's not a ton, but it is something. And Lush Growth is, I mean, you're going to be using green spells no matter what build you go. So this is worth taking every time. Over here, Source of Magic and Potent Mana. This is an incredible raid buff, but you can't give it to yourself. Source of Magic gives somebody mana. The more you charge a spell, the more percentage mana that you give to an allied healer. Down below, Potent Mana, Source of Magic increases the target's healing and damage done by 3%. This is incredible. This is so powerful, but you can't give it to yourself. So you don't need to. Don't take it outside of raid, but in raid, always grab this. Always help out a healer. This is super useful. So you're gonna find a good use for this. And you can even like do this if you wanted to in raid, just to make sure you give out a buff. There are other talents here you might want to look through and check out, but that's a lot of like what I recommend on the Evoker side. Now let's talk about the preservation side. On the preservation side of things, we already talked about like all of this. You know what Echo is, you know what Dream Breath is, you know what Reversion is, right? You know what these spells do. This is where Essence Burst is located. This is where Rewind is located. We didn't talk about Temporal Compression. Each stack of a bronze spell causes your next empowered spell to reach maximum level in 10% less time, stacking up to 4 times, which can make for a very fast empowered spell. This is nice, but it's mostly passive and going to work in the background. Now, our tier set's going to make you do bonus healing for each Temporal Compression stack you have, and your reversions have a chance to give you 2 stacks instead of 1. So Temporal Compression is nice, and it does work with a talent down here. Consuming a full Temporal Compression grants you an Essence Burst. I find this to be a little hard to manage and not something I think about too often, but it is there for those who care. You can make some good use out of this. Spirit Bloom is here, Double Essence Burst is here, Time Dilation. Over here on the bronze side, Temporal Anomaly and Resonating Sphere are right here. Pretty core to a lot of what we do. Play around with these and get rid of them only once you're comfortable. But I'm going to be real with you, most significant builds that run kind of standard bursty, echoey healing are going to run Resonating Sphere. It is so damn powerful. Some players have gotten Nozdormu's teaching to work for them, and that's fine. It's cool. I find it to be kind of risky and not worth the risk, but players have done it. So if it sounds interesting, once you're comfortable with the spec, give it a whirl. Let me know what you think about it. Golden Hour is located here for Reversion. The reason our echoes end up doing all the way up to 45 or 105% is because of Time Lord. Font of Magic is here. If you want an extra empower level, it's right here. You can get rid of this. I've played seasons where I've run no Font of Magic for an extra talent point. It's now located in the center of the tree, what's nice. But when you're starting, I highly recommend this. Down below is Power Nexus. You definitely don't need Power Nexus in dungeons and in delves. Maybe in delves, you might like it in delves, but in raid, this is often taken for higher healing builds, and for Blossom builds, they absolutely grab this. Over here, you can get an augmentation to delay harm. No, we're gonna make it. Time Dilation. So either Time Dilation delays 70% of damage taken, or you can reduce its cooldown by casting an Essence ability. These are actually kind of nice, but they're in my niche department. You might take them in Delves or super high-end Mythic Plus, or even in Raid if you need to get a defensive out and say like 2 of them in a 40-second window. You can really make this work. You can also might find that the extra stagger is doing wonders for keeping a tank alive through something horrifying. That being said, you're not going to grab this unless it is absolutely needed. I just figured I'd mention it. And down below that is one of the most fun talents in the game, Flow State. With 2 talent points in this, time flows 10% faster, increasing movement speed, cooldown recharge rate, and cast speed by 10%. So this gives you kind of half of a PI, which is very powerful. And if you run Chronowarden and you hit a very fat Spirit Bloom, you can get basically a PI for casting an empowered spell. It's very fun. That's a lot of cooldown management. PI is power infusion. For those of you who've never played with a priest before, it's a 20% haste buff that they can give out to a friend. It's very powerful. Fluttering Seedlings I talked about earlier. This, Field of Dreams, Ouroboros, and Cycle of Life are, and maybe not Ouroboros all the time, and Cycle of Life are all a part of the Blossom build. I'm not a Blossom player. I will not be going over it because I'm not the one to talk about that, but it's very cool, and they're going to be cooking this season. So if you end up liking Preservation and want to try an alternative playstyle, the Blossom players got you covered. There'll be some very cool builds. So look at the Blossom build or the Blossom Preservation playstyle, and you'll find those. Exhilarating Burst here in the middle makes your crits 230% effective instead of 200%, and 260% with 2 talent points. Very fun once we get a lot of crit, but you need a lot of crit for this one to feel good, but whew, it is good when you get it. This talent here, you can either have Spirit Bloom, increase essence regeneration, which is more niche, or reduce 10 seconds off of Spirit Bloom's cooldown, which is kind of incredibly strong. Here's where Emerald Communion is, and then down below Rush of Vitality. Don't take it. Don't take Dreamwalker. I see you. Press hover. Call of Ysera is down here. The Verdant Embrace powers up your Dream Breath or your Living Flame. Life Giver's Flame is what makes Fire Breath a heal. Not so good in single target, but my goodness, if there's a damage phase or there is a bunch of enemies, even 2 enemies, a full charge Fire Breath does a lot of healing. Spark of Insight I mentioned earlier. The consuming a full temporal compression gives you Essence Burst. Ouroboros was my beloved back when it was in a different spot on the tree. Casting Echoes will power up your next Emerald Blossom. Listen, when you power this up 5 times, your Emerald Blossom hits stupid hard. So if you like the idea of having a little pocket heal, one more little survival tool, grab an Ouroboros. Now, I don't tend to run some of these talents down here. In fact, I'm going to go make my tree look a little more like it normally does. But this talent right here, Renewing Breath, just makes your Dream Breath stronger. Even 1 point in this when you're playing Flameshaper and you're taking its Renewing Breath or Dream Breath power up move. Talent, excuse me, words, hard. I'm tired. I'm recording this at like 5 in the morning. You can get a really strong Dream Breath. You can couple this with Call of Ysera and you can get some of the fattest Dream Breaths you've ever seen. Love this thing. Again, Blossom build down here. Dreamflight, you can take this in dungeons now. You can play around Dreamflight. Super cool stuff because it's 100% stronger, uncapped AoE heal, excellent in raid, 2-minute cooldown only, and of course, just like Deep Breath, you're immune to crowd control. Also, I forgot to mention, it can remove root effects from you. So if you're rooted, you can Deep Breath out of it. Over here in the middle of the tree, Lifebind, this is where it is. Look, sometimes I get rid of Lifebind because I need another talent point. And some people would call me crazy. This is what I've run most of the beta, which might look really silly, but I needed a little more healing. You can make Emerald Communion strong without Lifebind, but Lifebind is a really good talent. Get rid of it only if you really know what you're doing. It's a little dangerous to get rid of. Having access to even 2 or 3 Lifebinds on targets before an Emerald Communion can make a world of difference. So just be careful if you're getting rid of this talent. Over here, Punctuality is where Reversion gets its 2 charges. Please always take that. If you're new to the game, and even if you're experienced, I think Energy Loop is the way to go. Disintegrate doing more damage. 35% more damage is a lot. It generates a ton of mana, and your mana management with Preservation is not hard. Just hit more Disintegrates and you're golden. That being said, some players do get rid of this to be able to flex into a different talent point. Like let's say they wanted Time of Need. Only do this if you are positive you are on top of your mana control. I wouldn't really do this unless I was in a coordinated group and I was playing perfectly and they were all playing perfectly. I tend to not leave home without Energy Loop. And if you're new, I really recommend this one so that you can be on top of your mana if the going gets rough. If you're healing lower keys, you might even be like, what's Bowser talking about? I don't run into mana issues. But I promise you, you can start running out of mana on Preservation if the going gets extremely, extremely tough. Time of Need. When you or an ally fall below 30% health, a version of you enters your timeline and heals them for blah. Essentially, your version of you from the future comes in, Verdant embraces the target, and then just whips Living Flames for a little bit. It's actually pretty good. It's more healing than you think it is. And there's a saying I have, background healing is busted. Anytime you got some hands-off healing where someone else is healing in the background, it's really potent to have that. So Time of Need, sort of like a godsend pugging talent, but you can leave it. I just gotta mention that it's decent in case any of you find that you're running into players or your group that just needs one little extra bit of help. Time of Need can work. Also, you can put Time of Need on your bars now and actually track the cooldown, which is kind of cool. The rewind talents for either 60 seconds off rewind or the 2 charges at 50% potency are right here. And then down below, Timeless Magic. This changed a little bit if you played early Dragonflight. Reversion, Time Dilation, Echo, and Temporal Anomaly last 30% longer, cost 30% less mana. This will also help with the mana issues, as moves like Temporal Anomaly with our 2 million mana and 131,000 mana cost, this can creep up on you. And imagine if that was 30% more costly, right? So you'll start running out of mana if you're not careful with some of these moves, as they can cost quite a bit of mana to cast. Down here is Grace Period for the bonus healing on targets with reversions, and Stasis just below that, one of my favorite go-to heals. And in the center of the tree, we have a new section of red magic. So we already talked about Life Bind. Titan's Gift. This has a very, very cool interaction I want to talk about. Essence Burst increases the effectiveness of your next Essence ability. This means your Disintegrate hits harder, your Blossom hits harder, and your Echoes... It doesn't make the Echo heal do more. It makes the Echoes like potency increase, which is really, really cool. But also, it makes Temporal Anomalies Resonating Sphere produce 56% echoes instead of 45%. So get an Essence Burst, throw a Temporal Anomaly, and you get a good chunk more healing on everyone with it. Cool little trick, nice little party trick, I highly recommend it. Here's Life Force Mender, which I used to get a little bit of flack for grabbing this talent before when it was up here in the center of the tree, but this talent has saved my buns. Living Flame is no longer a bad heal like Season 1 in Dragonflight. It has been a consistently pretty strong heal, and it's only gotten better. With Chrono Flames on the Chronoshaper side of things, or the Chronowarden side of things, excuse me, and with the amount of damage you can get out of this, and your Leaping Flames, and this is just a no-brainer for me. There are builds that won't run Life Force Mender, and therefore won't run Life Spark, but they're typically leaning into Blossoms or into more green healing, and they don't need as much on the Living Flames. So as long as you're covered and don't need more Living Flames in your life, it's okay. But I tend to love Life Spark and Life Force Mender so much, I don't tend to leave the house without them, but I have tried it and used it, and yeah, it's fine. So I wouldn't overthink it, but I'm going to recommend this to a lot of players because it's great damage and great healing. Life Spark, we already showed off earlier. Reversion has a chance to cause your next Living Flame to cast instantly and deal 50% increased healing and damage stacked up to 2 times. And in case you missed the demonstration of it earlier, I will just show you again real quick. You can throw out a Temporal Anomaly, and then hit reversions, and then each of these ticks has a chance of giving you an instant cast Living Flame. Your Living Flame will light up. You get a special little symbol on your HUD when a Life Spark is available. There it is. And now every single Living Flame that gets sent out that's empowered is 50% stronger. Your Leaping Flames, your Echoed Living Flames, all of it. I love this talent because it makes healing in pug groups way easier. And when there's nothing to do with an Echo after you throw a Temporal Anomaly, using Reversion to cash it out and set up these instant cast Living Flames sort of gives you a path to victory when the going gets rough. You'll have these instant cast heals to take care of issues without burning your bigger cooldowns. So I highly recommend Life Spark. It's very fun to play with. But again, there are builds that won't run some of these red talents and will go more green or go more into the utility in bronze. And as long as you can meet the healing checks, you can play around like that. It's a pretty flexible environment. But given the strength of Chronowarden and how many of you I know will want to play it, the Living Flame talents are going to pay dividends. So keep an eye on those when we go to hero talents. Okay, let's talk hero talents. And before I dive into any of these, a little disclaimer, I did just do a video on these. If you want a deeper dive, I'm going to go a little quick here. But if you're a Delve player, I want you to not worry about either of these. Pick whichever one sounds the most fun to you. I mean it. Delves, even probably at their hardest difficulty, can probably be outgeared to a degree where you can get away with Chronowarden or Flameshaper if you're skilled at the game. I don't think either one of these is going to push you over the edge in Delves. So pick the one that means the most to you fantasy-wise or playstyle-wise. In Mythic Plus, it's much of the same. I got a lot of people in my last video telling me Chronowarden is better, but we need to have a little talk. It's based on the kind of play that you're playing in. I think Flameshaper is better when you're pugging. Chronowarden might be better in coordinated play, but I don't think that's going to matter unless you are pushing top 0.5% content, top 1% content. Unless you are under geared pushing the limits, once you're geared, these are going to be clearing all the way through 10s and 12s with little issue. If you're skilled at them, you're going to be able to play them correctly. But yeah, there might hit a point where Flameshaper does math out to be better, or Chronowarden maths out to be better. You might see people pushing on Chronowarden because it has access to an additional defensive. That might be worth it. I don't want anyone in the comment section saying that one is clearly better than the other, because I bet you cash money I can clear the plus 12 category with Chronowarden or with Flameshaper with little issue. I do recommend Flameshaper for those who don't mind the extra complexity, and of course will pug heal a lot, as it does have access to more split second saving the day kind of pug healing. Chronowarden is very smooth. It reduces your cooldown reductions, you have the better, harder hitting living flames, and it just wraps up the kit in a way that is really nice and neat. So if you want things to stay close to the way they are in Dragonflight or easier to learn, I think Chronowarden's the way to go. If you want a little more complexity and a little more pugability, I think Flameshaper's got your back, but both seem viable. Starting with Chronowarden, Chronoflame. This is a living flame, but 15% of the damage or healing that you dealt to the target in the last 5 seconds is bonus. So you'll get up to 160,000 extra damage or healing with my current stat weights. This is awesome. Chrono Flames feel good, and they look really good too. If you've never seen these things, they look really, really, really neat. They didn't go very far. Damn it. 1 second. Very pretty spell. I'm a very large fan of it. 10 out of 10. Now let's go through some of the talents. Some of the most exciting ones are here on the right. Reverberation, Spirit Bloom heals for an additional 30% over 8 seconds. Yes, this works through echoes, so you can get some extremely strong echoed Spirit Bloom heal over times. Primacy means that you get up to 9% bonus haste per Spirit Bloom heal over time that you get out, which, by the way, flat haste, which means it acts quite a lot like Bloodlust or PI. And yes, if you combine this with Flow State, like I said earlier, it goes kind of crazy. Golden Opportunity is a little mid. Casting an Echo has a 20% chance to give you an Echo that's 100% more effective. Honestly, if you get one of these and you're tracking it, throw it on yourself. It'll help with mastery. It'll be nice in the long run. I don't think you're going to be able to hyper optimize your Golden Opportunities very easily, but if you do, cool. Over here on the left side, Warp. Hover now causes you to briefly warp out of existence and reappear, and it reduces the cooldown of Hover for 5 seconds. It's still Hover, so you can still cast while moving, and you can use it in place, or you can use it as a dash. And yes, you do disappear, so I'm sure there's some shenanigans that we can dodge or completely ignore if we time that correctly. And there's a talent right below it that either creates little moats. You can have 100% uptime on this, which is wild. It gives somebody 20% increased movement speed for 30 seconds. Yeah, you might be able to make this work in a high movement dungeon or high movement fight and really help out some of the slower players if you play your cards right. But for the sake of prog, Temporality, Warp reduces damage taken by 20%, starting high and reducing over 3 seconds. Kind of acts like a parry, which is super cool, but does require good timing. But I think you'll be able to push some pretty insane limits with Temporality if you play it correctly. Down here we have Double Time. When Dream Breath or Fire Breath critically strike, the duration is extended up to by 2 seconds, up to a maximum of 12. Very similar to Reversion in the way it does things. Or Time Convergence. Non-defensive abilities with a 45-second cooldown or longer grant 5% intellect for 15 seconds. Nice and powerful, very fun, love this. And you can extend it with essence spells, which is quite nice. Now before I get to the capstone, I want to talk over some of these because these are a bit more wordy. Temporal Burst. When you hit Tip the Scales, and no, it's not when you use Tip the Scales like the empowered spells. When you press the button, Tip the Scales overloads you with temporal energy, increasing your haste, movement speed, and cooldown recovery rate by 30%, decreasing over 30 seconds. So hit Tip the Scales and you kind of ascend for a little bit. This feels awesome, and it sort of makes you think about when you actually want to press Tip the Scales. If you're watching any of the footage of me playing this game in this video, you're going to notice I sometimes just rip Tip the Scales, and you don't really want to do that on Chronowarden. You want to use it as an emergency heal or in a set position to kind of set yourself up for success. And when you cast an empowered spell during that window, you'll give out a Threads of Fate. It will cause a nearby ally to gain a Thread of Fate for up to 10 seconds, granting them a chance to echo their damage or healing spells, dealing 15% of the amount again. This is going to sound so strong, like a little bit of mini augmentation and prez. Unfortunately, every time I test this, it's all right. It's okay. It's not a ton of damage. So I think this is a place where Chronowarden could be a touch stronger if it ends up underperforming, which I don't think it's gonna, but if it does, this is a good place to buff. Down below that, Master of Destiny, casting an essence spell will extend all of your active threads by a second, or each time you cast an empowered spell, unstable time magic reduces its cooldown by up to 6 seconds. So when you combine this with all the other CDR that's available in this kit, Instability Matrix just really tightens up the rest of the deal. So now when you're moving through your empowered spells, not only cooling down faster, but they might just jump up to 6 seconds past their cooldown and just kind of refund themselves faster. I love this. It feels great. You will get more empowered spells out. And if you combine this with like Nozdormu's teaching, you can probably get a ridiculous amount of cooldown reduction off these moves. But still don't think it's better than Resonating Sphere, unfortunately. But this is a very nice talent, and it will truly smooth things out for Chronowarden. If you like preservation and you always felt it was just a little tough on the cooldown management, this is what's going to make it even better. And then finally, Afterimage. This was our Season 3 tier set bonus. Empowered spells send up to 3 Chrono Flames to your target. Note that these aren't half potency. These are full Chrono Flames. So if you hit a Fire Breath, 3 of those enemies are going to take Chrono Flames to the face. If you heal your allies, like a Dream Breath or a Spirit Bloom, 3 of those people will get smart healed by Chrono Flames. And it's the full Chrono Flame, which yes means it benefits from all the other things that are affecting your Living Flame, and they count as real Living Flames, which means they have a chance to give you Essence Burst. Very fun, very cool. Chronowarden, again, it's good for players who want a little less to learn, who want preservation to feel just a bit smoother and a little bit easier to get into. I think Chronowarden makes it happen. So let's talk about Flameshaper. This one does add some complexity with a new move called Engulf, so we're actually going to start our journey there. Engulf will hit your target in Dragon Flame, damaging them for blah or healing them for blah. It's a pretty chunky amount, but for each of your periodic effects on the target, effectiveness is increased by 50%. This means that your Disintegrates within Kindle, which we'll talk about in a moment, will increase damage, your Fire Breath will increase damage, and I think your Deep Breath also genuinely counts if you can catch it in time, because it's technically a damage over time. This also means that your double reversions, your double Dream Breaths, all of that stuff will also qualify, and your Enkindles, for bonus healing. And you can get a lot stronger of a heal, right? Like 50% per effect is a lot. So you can even like Giga Heal tanks with this move. Now down below, Engulf increases the duration of Fire Breath or Dream Breath by 8 seconds, and it causes it to spread to a target within 30 yards. Excellent for something I like to call breath juggling that we'll talk about in just a moment. Burning Adrenaline makes Engulf quicken your pulse, reducing the cast time of your next spell by 30%, and it stacks up to 2 charges because Red Hot will give you an additional charge of Engulf and increases its damage further in healing. Then finally, Consume Flame. Engulf consumes 4 seconds of Dream Breath from the target, detonating it and healing all nearby allies equal to 300% of the amount consumed, reduced beyond 5 targets. In dungeons, this thing hits so hard. You will absolutely be able to save the lives of so many pugs with Consumed Flame. Engulfing a Dream Breath is incredible, and if you get a Dream Breath on a target that didn't get it, they'll have a full Dream Breath on them, so you can use that Dream Breath to engulf again later if you need additional healing. The possibilities are endless, and yes, it can fit inside your stasis, but I wouldn't worry about stasis or echo until you are very comfortable with this move. That being said, it is entirely possible to say, Dream Breath a bunch of people, and then engulf, look at that healing, engulf, and then let that stasis rip. Yeah, and it's as ridiculous as it looks. Engulf is a very cool move, and at a 30-second recharge, it fits in nicely. If you play your Engulf correctly, you can bridge the gap between your other cooldowns very easily. I find this to be super fun to play around with, and it really brings Flameshaper into the forefront in my mind for pugging, just because that ability to burst heal is so crazy good. Now, let's talk about the other talents. On the left side, Trailblazer makes your Hover, Deep Breath, and Dream Flight 40% faster. Hover travels 40% further, and yes, it does make your Deep Breath look kind of silly with how quick you go, and the dash is absolutely out of this world. If you don't like the dash being that crazy, you can always go Shape of Flame, Tail Swipe, and Wing Buffet, scorch enemies and blind them with Ash, causing their next attack within 4 seconds to miss. Incredibly useful talent if you don't want to go flying. Below that, Conduit of Flame, critical strike chance against targets below 50% is increased by 10%. Awesome. This will be more useful when we can stack more crit. We never say no to bonus crit, not on preservation. Titanic Precision, Living Flame, and Azure Strike have one extra chance to trigger an Essence Burst when they critically strike. We do not get Essence Burst on Azure Strike. That is for Devastation. For us on Preservation, that means if Living Flame gets a critical, that Living Flame will roll the dice one more time for an Essence Burst. It's cool, it'll get you a few more Essence Bursts, but it's not too crazy. It's only on criticals. So this will mean we get more Essence Bursts as we get more crit chance, but this first season, it'll only roll so many times. Over here on the right side, we have Enkindle. Essence abilities are enhanced with Flame, dealing 20% of healing or damage done as fire over 8 seconds. This makes your Disintegrate have a damage over time effect on it. This makes your Ember Blossom have a healed over time effect on it, which is probably going to be wild for Blossom players. And then it does make your Echo have a pathetic little heal on top of it. Listen, that's not the one. It's just really funny to me that it works that way. But then down below, Fan the Flames, casting Engulf reignites all active Enkindles, increasing their remaining damage or healing over time by 100%. Pretty powerful for doing a little bit more damage, but I think this is going to be the Blossom players' dream come true. That being said, I'm going to run Expanded Lungs. Fire Breath's damage over time is increased by 20%. Dream Breath's heal over time is increased by 20%. And note this isn't time, it is the potency of the move goes up. So this can really help with those big fat Dream Breaths that you can set up with Call of Ysera. And if you miss your Call of Ysera because you had to use Verdant Embrace or hold Verdant Embrace, you're still going to get a good Dream Breath because of this talent. And then anything additional you put into Renewing Breath. Down here you have Life Cinders. Renewing Blaze also applies to one other injured ally or to somebody you target at 50% value. I already mentioned it when we were going over the basic talents, but yeah, put this on a tank and that's going to do some crazy good healing. This is another reason why this is such a good pug healing hero talent tree for me, because this is the kind of stuff that will save runs, right? A tank is taking way too much damage. They're not able to hold it together. I can hit them with a Life Cinders, Renewing Blaze, and all of a sudden they can make it through the rest of the pull. Absolutely blessed ability. I love this. And that's what's going on with Flameshaper. Once more, play what you like, play what looks the most fun, play the fantasy you want to play. It's totally fine. They are close enough that I do not think it'll affect most players. And if it is affecting you, you're probably near that top 1% player base and actually pushing yourself, in which case change according to the groups you're playing with and you'll be fine. Anyone who's playing at a high level will know to change the talents based on what they need and not necessarily follow a guide like mine, because my guide's meant to get you to understand how these things work. Real quick, let's just talk about the tier set. It's nothing fancy, but I think with all the new hero talents, it's best to keep it on the simpler side. So I don't think it's a bad choice. The 2 set for Preservation is Reversion's healing is increased by 10%, and it has a 50% chance to grant 1 additional stack of Temporal Compression. Temporal Compression for the 4 set increases the healing of your next empowered spell by 10% per stack. So yes, that does stack up to 40%, so you can get some really juicy heals. And yeah, so you can hit Reversions, potentially get up to 4. If you need 1 extra one, you can always hit Blessing of Bronze and get yourself stacked up. And then you can slam some very fat heal. And that was a level 1 Spirit Bloom for 1,000,000. So imagine I sent out Temporal Anomaly, echoed a bunch of people, full charge that bad boy. Oof. Yeah, and then imagine that's on Chronowarden with the heal over time. Yeah, so it's a good tier set, but it's not a terribly complicated one, but I'm okay with it being simple, especially given all the new stuff going on. Now, these are some good example talents. I will say you might want to run Clobbering Sweeps or Having Wing Beats. You might want to take Sleepwalk, for any kind of skips. Feel free to play around with the talents on any of these trees, especially if you're doing delves or heroic dungeons early on, because you're probably not going to fail a dungeon for playing around with stuff to see how it feels. Have fun with these builds. This build on the right you're seeing is a fairly standard preservation build that I think will work with both Chronowarden and Flameshaper with little issue. That being said, there is this weirdo no lifebind build I was running that I'm not going to recommend for everyone. I'm going to be real with you. This isn't necessarily the setup for every individual. With Flameshaper and with some of the dungeons and how hard they were to heal with some of the pugs, I ended up running this to save my buns, and I'm pretty happy I did. But use them as templates to play around with. Don't think that there's just one way to play this game, because again, like I said when I started talking about talents, you really want to build based on the content you're doing. So early on, take suggestions from builds like mine and builds from others and play around and have fun. But as the content gets harder, you're going to need to tighten up things that aren't working for you. And that's why that experimental period is so important. So we're back to Bastion just to hit some training dummies and talk about what you can do as a player for basic rotations, basic combo stuff. You want to learn how to play the spec, and you've been following the video, but you're like, Bowser, this seems really complicated. Let's start with the most basic rotation in the world. I want you at the start of basically every pull, maybe while hovering, throw a temporal anomaly through as many teammates as possible. Then charge up your fire breath. Then, if you need to heal, you can heal with a living flame or with a spell, but if there's nothing happening, feel free to use your living flames for damage. And then I recommend hitting disintegrate to get your mana back. And then if nothing's happened, cash out those echoes, because echo lasts longer than reversion's cooldown. So you can throw a temporal anomaly, get your mana back, and do damage, and then react like, oh no, people need healing. I dream breath them. Maybe I reversion a few of them, right? Blah, 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 blah. And then I throw another temporal anomaly. And you can do this for basically ever and not run out of mana as long as you use disintegrates. Now, it's not very efficient, so I wouldn't necessarily always press temporal anomaly on cooldown, but if you watch any of my gameplay, you'll notice that I do this all the time. And there's nothing really wrong with it. As long as you can get some of that mana back from playing efficiently, or it's worth spending the mana to keep people alive, you can keep sending temporal anomalies. This will help you establish a flow, which will really help the learning process. And all other combos from here are all about what do you do after temporal anomaly, right? Do you want to use, say, Spirit Blooms and just get a big chunky heal on everyone? That's a good way to heal people up very quickly. You can temporal anomaly level 1 Dream Breath. That's my favorite way to heal. It kind of gets a good heal over time on everyone, and then I use reversions and living flames to patch people up as necessary. Maybe even more echoes and a verdant embrace to top them off. One of my favorites is called the double double. So you would go echo, reversion, echo, and then reversion, say like one more teammate. This can give all of your DPS, or maybe a few of your DPS in the tank, reversions on them, which is a really nice way to farm up these instant cast living flames and get a bunch of these powerful little grace periods on people so that your healing is stronger without using your temporal anomaly. Great when you get a big essence burst. I call it the double double. It's very useful. And then again, in case you missed it with stasis, my recommendation is if you want it to be burstier, put a temporal anomaly at the front of it. If you want it to be a combo extender, put the temporal anomaly at the end of it, which more often than not is stronger, especially in raid. And raiders, as a reminder, you can store temporal anomalies inside of stasis without incurring a cooldown, as long as you don't heal anybody and you stop after 2 spells. But this allows you to do a very big triple or quadruple setup temporal anomaly. Because remember, echoes last quite a while. So you can say, let's say a pull timer's coming up in a few seconds, right? Fight's about to start, everyone's getting ready to pull. You can then hit as many people as you can with temporal anomaly, and then throw out the other 3 you had stored, and the whole raid can be echoed. Great for an opening mechanic that does a ton of damage. The hardest part about the combo game is that it does take a lot of getting used to, and I will have some gameplay on screen here, and I will walk you all through some pulls. I plan on making some videos that are just that, are me going over pulls and sort of the regular gameplay of preservation. But throw temporal anomalies, cash out combos, and you're going to find that it all flows together nicely. And once again, when it comes to hero talents, both are going to be completely viable in Mythic Plus and in Delves, and I haven't really tested the raid or PvP environment yet. However, Chronowarden is going to be better for those who want less to change and a smoother baseline preservation experience. Those who want more, say, complexity and pug healing ability will find that Flameshaper does a bit more work for them. But seriously, have fun with these, especially as the start of the expansion is hitting, because we only get the start of the expansion at the start of the expansion, and then the power level goes up, everyone starts running into higher level content, and a meta will solidify. And this is definitely the time to play around and have a ton of fun while we're all doing delves or heroics or M0s and heroic raid in the first week. So I hope you have as much fun with preservation as I do. And that's gonna do it for this one. Listen, if you have any questions or concerns about how to play preservation, feel free to comment on the video. You can also stop by my stream, which is just Bowser the Healer, all one word, on Twitch. That'll be linked down below. You can also hop by my Discord and jump in the Ask Me Anything channel. Sometimes it could take me a little bit to get back to that channel if I'm really swarmed, but I promise you I'm not going to try to leave you on red. And as a reminder, a final reminder, please play the hero talents that you want to play. These are going to be so viable at so many different levels of play that really you're only going to be hyper optimizing these things if you're somebody who can hit consistently top 1% or higher. And if you are, you don't need me telling you that you need to adjust your talents based on your party. I just need to make sure that players know that are in the low, mid, and even mid-high level, you can get away with a lot in this game if you're good. So study preservation, really work that rotation, get creative with your solutions, and if you're looking for more help on how to deal with positioning, or you want some simple step-by-steps on how to play preservation, I'm going to be providing 2 videos on that in the future. I have a lot of content I need to work on, so I'll try to get to those as fast as possible. I'm also launching 2 more YouTube channels, one of which will be starting very soon. So look forward to that. And the only other thing I have to say is that I always get these comments whenever I make a guide of somebody coming in here being like, I would love preservation if you didn't have to be a dragon. Go away. I need somewhere to link this video so that you can hear it. Stop doing that to me. I love dragons. I absolutely love dragons. Why do you come in here and slander the dragons? You're weird for that. Okay, that's it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.